Okay, so now we're on to sewing the legs for Luna. And what we're going to need is we're going to need our foot, a patterned foot pad piece, and we're also going to need the 2 pieces that we had for our legs. There's 1, 2 there. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our 2 leg pieces right sides together, and then we're going to just pin those into place in the middle. Again, if you feel like you need more pins, don't worry about that. Just put some more pins at a right angle to your seam. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave this bit here open, which is the top of the leg, because we want to be able to stuff down into that. But for this part of the sewing, we also need to leave the bottom of the foot open, because we need to be able to insert the foot pad onto the end. So we're going to make sure that our legs match up at the bottom, so that they're nice and even. And that pin's in there, that's good. Okay, the next thing that I want you to do is I want you to take a tape measure, or I've got a seam gauge here, and I want you to, on the side that you're going to be sewing, to measure up 1/4 of an inch and make a dot. And both, oh, fingers in the way. Okay, so you're measuring up 1/4 of an inch from this sole here. So I've got 1 little dot just here, and I've got 1 little dot just there. Shall I make this a little bit darker so you can see those? Now I've not measured in from the seam allowance at the moment. It's just measuring up from the bottom for me. So hopefully you can see those. Because that's where we're going to start and stop stitching. We're going to finish at the end. We want to start at the top here. But as we go down here, I want to stop at that point just there. Make sure your edges are together. Want to stop at that point there. I know that that's short of the seam, but that's deliberate, okay? We want to have a little flap that opens at the bottom here, because that's going to help us put our foot pad in. I know some people have asked me about videos for how to sew the foot pads in, and this is my top tip, is to leave that 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. So what I want you to do is put your piece of your leg into your work. I want you to take a couple of stitches forward and back to secure that edge, because we're going to be put pressure on there to fill it. Make sure the toes are aligned, and then we're going to then, if you can see, coming up to my dot, stitches backwards and forwards. Let me just show you that on the screen. So we've got our dot there, and our stitches have finished. On this bit we're actually going to start at the toe because of the way we want to sew it. So we're going to start in from the edge. So we're going to start here, a couple of stitches forward, back, and then we're straight onto the curve. So I'm going to use my up down needle, up down button, so my needle will always finish, but hand crank it otherwise if it's not, to anchor that in. And then we're going to again lift the presser foot and move the work if we need to while we go around this curve. So we've got some tension under there, so let me lift that up, and you can see the tension lift straight away. Move it just slightly. You're only moving it a fraction, but it makes all the difference, believe me. Top tip that is, just to keep going around your curves. It works really well as well. If anybody's watched my bunting video, you'll know that that's the same technique I use when I'm satin stitching my letters on my bunting as well. So it gives a really nice curve to the letters. So again, needles in the work. Let's just make sure that's going to be in the right place. Okay, and then we're going to carry on up here now. At the top and bottom, needle up. I'm going to snip this off here. So just to demonstrate again, we've sewn to the end of the foot, but we've left this 1/4 of an inch. So that flap there, if you can see, can fold back, and that's what we need. We need to be able to have that flexibility to be able to fit our foot pad in next. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to, because we've got a curved edge here, we're going to just put a little snip in to that, towards that angle there, in the little bit where the crease is. And then because this is all curved, we're just going to take out our little V's again. So this will lie lie flat for us, or you can use your pinking shears if you've got pinking shears. Just making sure that we've gone through enough on the other side to hold it tight. If you do pop a seam while you're stuffing your Lunas, don't panic. Take the stuffing out that you've already put into it, get it all flat again, and just reinforce that seam with another row of stitching. It'll close up any holes that you've got, but it'll just allow it then just to sit neatly. Hopefully you can see. I'll look a bit strange-handed on this. So we're not going to cut too far down to the bottom, but just round that curve. This back seam here is straight. Now, I do know that some people cut out their legs on a fold here, and that's been suggested to me. But because I leave this 1/4 inch open here, then I'm not going to do that way. But if you do, it's not a problem. What you would do then is hold your toes together in that seam, hold it flat, and do a cut through to the 1/4 inch mark through that back fabric there where it would be if you were cut on a fold. We're not on this one, and that will then give you your little flap that you need, which will help you put your foot pad in. So we've done that now, so we can take our pin out, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our foot pad. Now on here we can see that I've orientated the flowers. Now there's upside down, so that's going to be the right way. I want the flowers to be going up when Luna's sitting on the edge of her shelf. And what I want you to do now is, we had the pattern piece for the foot pad. And if you remember, when we were cutting this out, there were some little triangles on the corners of the pattern piece, and I've just cut them out of this pattern. And what we're going to do is we're going to line that back up again on the foot pad, and we're just going to put those little notches in with a little cut into through the work, through the piece of fabric, and it's just going to put a little snip in there, and that's just going to be a little marker for when we're matching these up, because those are going to match the front and the back seam. Now when you're putting your foot pad in, it's going to depend on how well it fits as to how wide your seam allowance is on these two seams, because obviously if they're slightly wider then your foot pad will be slightly smaller. So don't be frightened to trim down your foot pad in order to make it fit. Don't think that it's got to be that size, because sometimes in sewing we do need to adjust things slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open this up now. So open up at the foot edge, and I'm going to put the top end of here, these flowers, because we know she's going to sit toes up, so the little notch on the end here is going to go against that seam just there. So I'm matching the edges of the fabric up, but I'm just going to have the notch where that seam joins. And I'm just going to put a little pin in, just take a little bite of the foot either side of that seam. And again, if you remember, we did the forwards and back stitches, and that just reinforces that end, because again we're putting pressure on this seam now, aren't we, to open it up. And what I'm going to do now is just offer that foot pad up, and I can see that it's going to be a little bit too big because there's quite a lot of excess fabric and we're pushing that inside, the foot pad inside. So what I'm going to do is just take my pins out for a minute. So do the same to yours, offer what's called offer it up to your piece of work with your seams matching. And if it's just too big, then what you can do is just mark your notches slightly in further from the edges. And then I'm going to use my pinking shears, and I'm just going to take a small amount off. It's not a lot of, as you can see, just a very small amount that I'm taking off from round the outside. Because you're taking it off from all the way round, it doesn't need to be very big, this amount you're taking off, because that will make quite a bit of difference to the foot pad. Remember to round it off on the edges. So we've got the same as we had before, just a little bit smaller. And if I put these pieces on here, you can see that I've not taken off very much at all, but you'll be surprised what a difference it makes to have taken those little bits off. So again, let me put those in the bin. I don't want them in my machine. I just move my machine out of the way actually while we're just doing this, because it'll probably be easier for you to see against the dark. So I'm going to again make sure my flowers are up, and I've got my mark on the back, and that's going to match up with my toe seam. So I'm going to push that in and just hold it against there, and then I'm going to put a pin either side. And I'm just taking a small bite of the foot fabric and the foot pad so it goes through. to not put pins in my mouth while I'm on camera, hey, it's not very safe. Okay, and that side as well. And then what I'm going to do now is come to the back side here, and I'm going to just do the same thing here. And it's just going to anchor that down. We can move these pins again in the future if we want to, but just for now, and as you can see, that little bit at the back there, the little bit we left unstitched, is just spreading to enable us to hold this pad in place. Then what I want you to do is almost go to the quarter point, and you're going to match up the edges as much as you can do. If you're a little bit proud, don't worry about it. Again, this is where we're just muddling it through to fit. And it's quite a similar, I think if you're hand stitching the Lunas, this is very similar to what you have to do then anyway. So we're just keeping this foot pad straight. There's no creases, no puckers in this at all. And we're just pushing the seams, the foot pad into the foot just until it feels right, and we can just put a little pin in just to hold it. So you can see there's a little bit proud of my outside fabric. Another pin just here needed, I think. But the foot pad itself is flat. So let's go across this side now. So let's do the halfway point first, where we think that should be. A little bit fiddly, but hopefully you can see what I'm trying to achieve. Little pin in there. Another one just here. And what you're doing is you just, the heat from your fingers and the manipulation of your fingers against the fabric does just smooth those fibres down so that they will stretch, or they will accommodate this foot pad. And again, you're just trying to, it might take you 2 or 3 goes, don't worry, I've done about 4 or 5 of these Lunas now, so I'm a bit more used to it. But if this is especially if it's your first one, and if you've not hand sewn one before, or you've not machine sewn one before, or you're not an experienced sewist, then just take your time, be kind to yourself. It is a fiddly job. I think even the most experienced sewing people would say that this is a little bit of a fiddly step. So we've got a bit of a porcupine going on here. So if you can see that foot pad, actually, apart from where the pins are taking in the thing, is actually flat. And if we turn it over, we can see that the fabric on the this is the inside of the leg, don't forget. We haven't turned it round the other way yet. Is just on the not puckered at all, and it's just sitting nice and flat. What I suggest at this stage is, and it's not often I'm going to suggest this to you, but I do at this stage, is you take a needle and thread with a contrast thread in it, and then what you do is we tack it, because trying to facilitate and work around all of these pins without either stabbing yourself and getting blood on Luna, which is not supposed to be a task of blood, sweat and tears, is it? Do that little knot again. So hold your thread across, hold it with your fingers through. 1, 2, 3 wraps. Hold those wraps tight, and then push your needle through all the way through. And you'll get a very nice little knot on the end of your work. Oh, that was not as neat as it should be. But it's holding fast, that's fine, it's only for tacking anyway. And then what we want to do is just choose somewhere. I would choose on the edge here rather than on a seam, is just do some little running stitches. So that's just little in and out pokey stitches, avoiding where you are, but we're just trying to guess approximately 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. And we're keeping the foot pads, trying to avoid all of these pins with our thread. But the aim of the exercise is to keep the foot pad flat with no crinkles, no ruckles in it. As you go round, take your needles out, your pins out, and that'll help you see where you've gone to and just make it easier for you to work with. And on the inside, we can see there's no rucks or anything on there, on that seam line. It does take a few minutes more, and you can try and take it to the machine if you like, and believe me, I have, but I ended up with one Luna foot bigger than the other, and that's not what I wanted going forwards. So when you come forward to here, so just take that as well, basically what I'm saying is just take that extra time. Just be kind to yourself, it does make it easier. Okay, so what we're going to do now is coming up to the seam. We're going to go into the other side of the work at the edge of that, so you can actually see that I'm coming through with my needle where that bottom of the leg seam joins the foot pad. Then just go through that foot seam at that point, just through this back seam here, and it'll take you on the other side. And then if you take your needle back into your work, you'll just be able to, in through the side of the foot, you'll just be able to see where you were, and then you can carry on. You're trying to get a nice curved round edge, not a jagged square. Hopefully that's better, you can see. Oh, got a little bubble in my thread. It does happen. And each time you go past a pin, just take that one out because it's one less for you to get hooked up onto. Okay, and some more stitches going round. So if you were hand sewing, I think this is pretty much what you do anyway from the instructions. But we're just going to then go on and put it on the machine and machine sew it together. But the tacking stitches mean we don't have to navigate all of these pins, as I say. It just makes it a little bit easier for us. So again, we're coming up to this seam again. So we're going to do the same. We're just going to leapfrog that seam, because what we don't want to do is try and incorporate that seam into a stitch, because if we do try and push it to one side or the other, we're going to get a pucker. So we want that seam to be free floating, and I'll just explain that a bit more in a second. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment whilst I'm just concentrating to get this done. And just do a little stitch just to hold that still. It's not going to come undone because we're not going to put much pressure on it at the moment. It's just for tacking to take that final pin out and cut through our tacking thread. So what I can show you here is that we've got a foot pad onto the bottom of our Luna that's still oval. And then when we turn it over, this foot pad here has splayed out here at that point there where the back seam was for the foot pad, and again where the toe seam is for the foot pad, because of that 1/4 inch that we left at the bottom of those seams, and that's just allowed it just to sit flat. So now we're going to then turn it over, because we know that the foot pad's going to be flat, and our job now is to sew just the other side of these tacking stitches with our machine, and we're going to stop when we get to the edge of the this seam here, because we want this seam still to float. So we're going to do it in 2 halves, if you like. So we're going to first start here and come round here, and we're going to reverse and stop our stitches and break our threads, and then we're going to rejoin it again at this same point here at this other side of the toe joint, toe seam, and then we're going to sew round this bit just here, and again just stop there. And what we're trying to make sure is that our start and stop point is where our seam was for our leg stitches and for our toe. Okay, it'll all make sense, don't believe me, honestly. So let's start with this. Okay, so in order to do this, because of where the position of my needle is at my machine at the moment, it's centre. If I try and do that, I've got so much of my presser foot right over onto my work, it's going onto the foot, it's going to make it difficult. But if I now take my needle and I can press, I've got an electronic one, it'll just move it, but sometimes there's a dial to move your needle across, and I'm going to move my needle as far as it can towards this edge of the presser foot, and you could use a zipper foot if you wanted to as well, but this one should work with this. And now we've got so much less going onto the work when we're stitching. It should make it easier, well, it does make it easier for you to navigate. So again, I'm going to position my foot, so my foot pad is flat against the bed of my sewing machine, and I'm going to keep that flat. And then my task or my role is to keep all of this fullness here away from being under the needle just while we're going round and through. So we're going to start stitching at the bottom of the other seam. I'm going to take a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches back just to secure that. And this is one time to reduce the speed on your machine as well, slow it down slow. And I'm going to just keep just 1 or 2 threads width on the other side of our tacking threads. So hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to use my needle up down thing because we're going to have to pivot while we're doing this. So hand crank your needle into your work if you need to just adjust it, and just take it nice and steady round. So you're sewing round a circle, so there's going to be some curve to what you're doing anyway. If you come to a point where you've got, looks like your fabric's going to bunch up, lift your presser foot up, smooth it down, and then put your presser foot back down again, and it'll just give you that ability to just turn around the corners. So again, we've got a little bit here where it's going to bunch up. So just move those fibres. Keep your foot off your pedal whilst you've got your fingers really close to this work. We don't want any trips to accident and emergency. Needle back down into your work again. Hopefully you can see. And I'm just keeping just the other side of those tacking stitches. Okay, we're coming up to where the seam is flat against the pad. So I'm going to now, hopefully you can see, if I gave you a pound every time I said that, hey. And I'm just going to reverse stitch just to secure that part. Needle up. Let's just take this out and have a look. Where's my snips? Take our threads off there and where we started. And if we get this positioned right, there won't be any gap at all. So we can see on the bottom of the foot pad here, hopefully you can see my white stitches there, just on the inside of the brown tacking stitches. And I've gone from one side to the other. What I'm going to do now is go on this side. So I'm going to push this seam over where we've just sewn. And then we're going to go back in again here and then sew the other side. I hope this is all making sense. So reverse that as well because we need to reinforce that point because it's going to be stuffed. So needle down, just make sure your fabric's all going to be sitting straight. Just take your time. This isn't a time for zooming with your machine. Even if you're in a rush, don't rush this bit, seriously. Take your time with this. If you rush anything else, that's fine, but just take your time on this bit. Because it's really worth taking those extra couple of minutes just to get it nice and neat. And this is probably one of the most challenging bits, I think. I think this and trying to get the ears into the head. And then reverse and reinforce your stitches at that point there because that's where it's going to have some pressure. Needle up and then let's just snip. And then when we have a look at our foot pad, we can see we've got stitches all the way around. Well, let's just frame slightly. And because we're on the inside of our stitches, you don't need to take out your stacking stitches if you don't want to, but if you do, that's fine too. Oops. Don't want to, especially if you've got a light coloured fabric, you might want to take your stitches out if it is a contrast so that you don't have to then see that through. Okay. Tacking stitches have just got caught in my stitches just there, so cut them short and then they should come out. There they are, that's it. Here's where we started. These should just pull out quite easily. Yes, they do. Okay, so just trim off these little loose threads that we've got. Okay, so the next stage then is going to be exactly what we've done before, and we're actually, so then let me just show you this final foot pad. So that's just sewn round, but we've just done it in 2 halves. That's all we've done. And then when we pull this out, the shaping of it will be there. So pull this apart, and what we're going to do is we're going to be pushing the foot in with our fingers and then with our knitting needle into the bottom just to get it started for us. So push that up, then take your trusty knitting needle, and if you hold on to the 2 seams on the side, be careful if you're holding the, can't do it that way, if you're holding the knitting needle against yourself, you don't poke yourself through your clothes, but if you just wiggle it, it should then hopefully quite easily just turn through, and then just pull that through. Again, we're going to do what we've done before. We're going to ease out our stitches and our foot pad. We're going to have a look and see what we think to the way that we've worked. And because we've already put the zigzags into the little triangles, and we've done that with we've braided our edges, we should have a very nice, neat little foot pad there. Little threads coming through there, that's from the tacking, I think. Okay, and use the edge of the knitting needle to just poke through on the seam edge. This foot will take more shape once it's been stuffed. There's one edge. And there's the toes. Let's just poke the toes out, because that all gives it all the shape as well, doesn't it? So as you can see, there's no hole at the bottom of this foot at all, or the bottom there where we did leave a little bit extra for the seam. We've got a nice little neat foot pad. So let me just get some stuffing, and we'll put some stuffing inside this leg. And we've got to start off slowly with the legs because they do take some stuffing. But once you get going with it, it's not so bad. Just be careful with the end of your knitting needle that you don't go through your... It's just about feeding it in really, once you've started to get some in. And again, this is why we reinforce the tops of the stitching, isn't it, on the tops of the legs, because we know we've got to put some pressure on them to get the stuffing inside. And other people are going to have other ways of doing this, I know. I'm only showing you the way that I do it. I'm hoping I'm not making it look too clumsy. Talk amongst yourselves whilst I just stuff this. There is some going in. Maybe it is a time just to use something a bit thicker. Yeah, that's going a little bit better. Just be careful not to poke through any of your seams or anything. If you hold your Luna in your fist like this, your legs, then usually you can push in your stuffing. There you go, that's better. It's better technique, isn't it? And every now and again, just stop and use your knitting needle or your chopstick, whatever you're using, and just coax that down. And we want it to go into the toes. I want it to go down and into Luna's leg. So it starts to fill out that foot pad, as you can see. Oops, through thread, sorry. So yeah, this is going inside. I can feel it going in through my hand. Just be careful not to put pressure on your side seams. Don't want anything to pop, ideally. Just push it back down again. you're bored of this bit, just fast forward it, I won't be offended. But for those that are doing other stitching, then you might not mind watching me, just to understand that it does take time just to stuff the legs. And hopefully we can see that foot pad now starting to take shape. The more we stuff it, the better it'll be. I'm quite pleased with that one, that looks nice. The knack is getting them both the same. The first Luna I ever made had one foot bigger than the other, but I just thought it was endearing, so I left it as it was. It's all a learning curve, isn't it? And we've all got our own idea of what perfection is and what not. So just go with whatever you're comfortable with, and if you're happy with it, then that's fine. You're only here to please yourself. Unless you've got a very fussy recipient, and then you might want to be taking a bit more work, a bit more time over it, but that's your call. As I say, you'll be surprised how much stuffing these Lunas do take, actually. So that's all just gone straight down into her foot. As I say, just coax the shape out. As we can see, we've got those lovely roses there on the bottom. Make sure that you're happy with how full her toes are and her heel. And then once you've got that bit done, you can then carry on. That's folded in, hasn't it? The one thing to make sure about as well, I don't think I mentioned it on the arms actually, but just be aware that when you've finished doing your arms and your legs, just hold them up against each other. Just make sure they're even. If you have a different seam allowance on each one, that definitely will affect how thick they are and how even they are. But obviously you're trying to make it so that it's not too noticeable. So that's why, as I said to you, just choose a seam allowance and then just keep it consistent then, because that's your best measure of success, is to have a consistent seam allowance. And that's the same whether it's in dressmaking or in toy making or home decor for that matter. If you keep that same difference on both pieces, if you're working on more than one piece, then it will actually help you stay consistent. So right, let's put some more down here. Try and get our ankle nice and stiff. Okay, that's looking good. Got a little bit of a fat ankle, I think. Just coax the stuff in how you want it to be. The more you do, the better you'll get at these as well. It's been a little while since I've made one, so I just thought, being as I wanted to make them, I thought I'd bring you along with me so you could have a look and see what it's like. Maybe somebody will do a video of hand sewing one day. That'd be nice too, wouldn't it? So hopefully you all know about the Cool Crafting Luna and Friends Facebook group. There's about 14,000 members there now, which is absolutely amazing worldwide. She's got quite a following, this little rabbit has. So if you've not had a chance to find that yet and you are a member on Facebook, then have a look, because Sarah Peel, who is the designer of Luna Lapin, she just make sure you don't pull any pins or anything into your work as well. Give them all a good scrunch afterwards and make sure you've not picked up any pins while you've been doing this. Yes, sorry, Sarah Peel. She often posts on there as well, and I think it's her daughter Grace as well. They both post regularly. So if you want direct access to the designer and the things that she's up to, then absolutely this is that's the best place to be for that. Or you can contact them at their website as well at www.coolcrafting.co.uk. And as I say, I'm not affiliated in any way. I just enjoy making the Lunas, so this isn't. I'm not biased or influenced by that. So the top of here's just got folded in slightly, so I'm just going to pull that back out. All you can see is hands keep stuffing this poor leg, isn't it? As I say, I think you'd be surprised how much it takes. But she's worth it. And especially she needs her legs, doesn't she? She's going to be a lovely ballerina. This one is destined to be. So yeah, we're getting there now, but that's quite nice and firm. I'm happy with the foot. I'm happy with the foot pad as well. That looks nice on there and nice and neat and round. She is going to have ballet slippers on this one, and sometimes you might want to put shoes on them, but again, we still want a nice foot pad, don't we? Okay. A little bit more. And then we're going to close off the ends with the machine. So if you've persevered this far, well done. Thank you. Just keep pushing your Luna in, your fibres in. And then what we're going to do is make sure we've not got anything turned over on this top here, this top edge, and make sure you've got back to your raw edge. Push the fibres in past the point you're at, because what you want to be able to do is, and we've still got the needle across to the left, is match up your two front and back leg seams. So you flatten them together, and then we're just going to take a run of stitches about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Across the edge there. And that will just keep that stuffing in and down. And also I have seen people before where they've pushed the stuffing down and then just put like a pin here. So it gives them just more room, so that stuffing doesn't overnight. If Luna gets up and starts dancing in the night while we're all asleep, it won't go back up again, because that's where we're going to attach Luna to into the body. So we need some room to manoeuvre to be able to get the leg in. So go ahead and do the second one. I've already got mine tacked. I've just got to sew that on now. But again, just doing exactly the same thing. I'll do start at one toe and go round to the back, and then stop and start again and do the other side. So let's just do that quickly. Or not quickly, we're taking our time, aren't we? A couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back. Just make sure that you're keeping the right side of those brown stitches on mine, your tacking stitches. Not too much, otherwise you'll make the edge of the foot too small. But when you come to the needle in, so you can lift the foot up, that's it, and get that seam out of the way so you can see where you're going to make that nice and round. And then forward and backwards again, just to reinforce. Take your work out. I keep saying take your work out, don't I? I mean the leg. You know what I mean, I think. So we've got this row of stitches. Now we've got a little crease log. So what we're going to do now is get our quick unpick. So again, it's not about not making mistakes, it's about knowing how to get out of them. So we're going to just put our quick unpick underneath that thread where the pleat is, and cut through it. And then we're going to release that fabric and just tease it back with our finger. And I'm just going to take out a couple of stitches where it's just gone off line, where I don't want it to be. So just be gentle with those while you just take those stitches out. And what we need to do now is we need to start back here, because we need to reinforce these last few stitches, and we need to go forward a bit more, so we reinforce those. But we've got to keep that straight so that we don't. So you're going back on top of the stitches you've already done, and you're going to go backwards and forwards, and then you're going to come forwards again, come round, over the top of the stitches that you'd already done, and then just backwards and forwards again just to reinforce. And what that does is it just patches up the hole that's made by me cutting through the thread. So as you can see, I had a little crease in there, but that's now gone. So I'm going to fold this centre seam now back over the other side. I'm going to start just there, come around the others around here. So this is just a quick recap of what we actually did now. Hopefully it all makes sense. And hopefully we won't have any creases. If you do, put your needle in your work, lift your presser foot up, just release the pressure on the fibres, do a little bit more, and then just keep smoothing it as you come around. And remember, you are on a, you're not doing a rectangle, so remember you're on a curve. So anchor your work down, and then you're able to then put this seam out of the way. And so if we look again here, start and stop in here, coming round to the front just here, and start and stopping again there. So now I'm just going to take out my tacking stitches on this one, and then we can start again. You don't need to watch me stuffing it again, you know what's happening, but I'll show you both of them once they're finished. So you can see that we've hopefully got them both equal in size, which is the aim of the exercise. And so long as we've kept the same distance around the edge, then we should have done. So I'll pop back in a minute when this one's stuffed, and I'll show you both legs together. Okay, so now we have 2 lunar legs. The last thing that we need to do is make sure that they're even. Obviously, hopefully you can see on the bottom there, we've got the 2 nice little decorations there, and they're pretty even to me. They're even enough for me, should I say. And obviously if you want to get yours even more precise, then feel free to fiddle around with them a little bit more, but for me that is going to be enough, because we have to remember that we can be ultra critical and we can find all the fault that we want with the work that we've done, but at the end of the day, when when Luna's all together and she's got a beautiful dress on, or it's as a boy doll and he's got his trousers and his waistcoat and his shirt or what have you, people don't look at the individual items quite so closely. So as I say, these to me are fine. The only thing that you do need to do is just stand them up somewhere and make sure that they are the same height. So I can see one's a little bit more, and if they're not, just trim one off so that they're then the same height. Because that's the important thing, isn't it? That she's got legs that are the same, if we can do. And these little pins here are just holding the stuffing down, and then after I've sewn her onto the body, I'll scrunch that stuffing back up towards the top, and that'll fill these bits up to the body. So don't be concerned that that's there at the moment. That's just to hold the stuffing down. But I say we've got two foot pads on there. Hopefully you can see they're pretty okay, I think. Nice and circular. Might need a little bit more teasing out, but as I say, they're good enough for me. So there we go. That's how I put on my feet pads. If you've got another way to do it, then I'm sure you'll put it in the comments, and then anybody else who comes along and watches the video will be able to try your way as well as my way. But for now, that's it on the legs. We're next on to the body. I'm going to say next, because I think if we do the body next, then what I think is that once we've got the head done, you want to have something to put it straight onto. So let's get the body done and first, and we'll put the legs in and do all of that, and then we can then finish with the head, and your Luna will instantly start and take on a whole new personality then. So 2 legs done, and then we've got our 2 arms done already, and we've got our 2 ears done and ready. So we're motoring along really. Come back tomorrow. Well, it'll be tomorrow for me now because I need to pop out now, but come back tomorrow and I'll see how I get on, and we'll see if we can do some more of our Luna and get a finish for you, so that if anybody is following along and is against a deadline, then they can get their Luna done as well. Have a great day everybody. Thank you for watching.